Yesterday was one of those days where just nothing was really going as planned, and I've been trying to find some time to clean this dump up for quite a while, and there's just never an opportunity. So yesterday I just kind of said, screw it, let's start trying to clean this place up, and ripped every damn thing apart. And this morning I was like, okay, I'll take a majority of the stuff to the dumpster, and this stuff only happens to me, but I don't know if somebody stole it or what, but the whole damn dumpster is gone. Welcome to my life. So I figure we'll go over some of the little stuff that this car is going to need as we start kind of doing our Holley install and turbos and all that other good stuff. And we'll also take a look at some of the parts that have been rolling in from Holley that getting ready to obviously put onto this thing. So all these cars tend to suffer from this problem at some point in time, but some stupidity on the whole German engineering thing is there is these metal flaps inside of the dash that are for all the heat and AC stuff, and they have holes in them that are covered in this weird foam, but the foam dry rots and then it shoots out of all of the ducting in the car and makes a big mess. And also as a result of that, the heat starts to either not work or work really poorly, and this car definitely has that going on. So once we pull the interior apart for some of the other stuff, then we'll address that at the same time. That's something that I didn't know was a thing until after purchasing the car. Another thing that kind of sucks about this car that you don't really appreciate until you don't have it is this thing has no cup holders at all. And you've seen people make some 3D print stuff, and there's some different things that you can buy, but they're all kind of janky, and I haven't quite found a solution for that yet, but hopefully somehow, some way we can incorporate a non-ghetto looking cup holder at some point in time. Like just the other morning, I took my other car rather than this one just because I had a cup of coffee and I wasn't about to give that up, and trying to shift gears and everything else and hold a drink, just I don't have the patience to deal with it. So hopefully we can find a good solution there. I think all of the other problems are going to get addressed during the Holley install. So one, the ECU in this car is kind of pissed off about being in the car. And I've never seen this before, but if you just turn the car on and start it, the thing has like I don't know, it's not necessarily a rev limiter, but it feels like it's dropping cylinders and stuff. However, if you cycle the key and then turn the key back off and then turn the key back on, then it runs perfectly fine. So that's kind of weird, a little quirk annoyance, but not the end of the world. But what is kind of annoying is the speedometer is in the Porsche transmission, which is going directly to the gauge cluster. So there is actually no input to the ECU as far as vehicle speed goes. So what happens is when you're trying to drive this thing slow, the idle control kicks on and off. So you'll watch the thing like pull 25 degrees of timing and put it back, and you know it goes back and forth and it makes the whole car buck and jerk. It's kind of easy to essentially just avoid driving like that, but that's something I would like to address. And kind of as a result of that, it gets an intermittent check engine light that comes on and off. That would be easy enough just to turn off, but can't justify burning HP tuner credits to take care of that when theoretically we should just be ripping all the wiring out of the car here any day now. And kind of goes along with that a little bit, but probably the worst part about this car, and ironically the guy that did the swap, he told me ahead of time that his least favorite part about this car was this as well, but the way that the GM drive-by-wire throttle pedal is mounted in the car is a little bit weird. The way, like from a mechanical standpoint, everything looks fine, and if it was like your first go at putting the pedal in, it's exactly how you would mount it because it makes sense. But what ends up happening is like, you know, the pedal's usually kind of like along the lines of this, but this one, like the pedals, the angle of it is just off. So you find your foot like, essentially like it's like your toes are trying to come all the way up to your knee. So after you drive it for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever, your leg feels like it's gonna fall off. So once I'm climbing around in the dash, unplug the harness, I'll make a new bracket for the throttle pedal. That shouldn't be a big deal at all. And sort of the last thing, again, I touched on the awesome tape player that's in the car, but the exhaust is not loud outside of the car, and it doesn't drone, but it's kind of really like deep and bassy inside of the car. And then the radio is really terrible at the same time. So by the time you turn the radio up loud enough to kind of cancel out the exhaust noise. Like your brain just feels like it's going to explode and the radio sounds terrible. But I was a little bit torn on where I'm going to mount some stuff inside of the car, and I needed some parts to show up before I kind of made a decision on that. So I'll throw new speakers in it and new head unit, and just got to figure out where everything's going to mount first. The weather the last week or two has been abnormally warm, even though before that it was abnormally cold. So I just have enjoyed driving this thing enough that I'm a little hesitant to pull it apart, because once we start yanking all that wiring out, it's going to be a pretty big commitment to doing the whole install to get it back up and running. But anyways, let's take a look at some of the Holley parts that have been trickling in. So the first thing I did, which I'm not even going to take it all the way out of the box, but I haven't bought anything on eBay in probably 20 years, but I bought a factory engine harness for this car because a lot of the engine harness connects into the body harness, and the actual engine harness that's currently in this car is like $3,500 or something, because it's like a production, like custom, really nice harness that actually connects into these, you know, the body connectors. So the harness just plugs right in. So I want to be able to remove that and sell it, and then the Holley will kind of be independent, and then we can run everything that needs to connect to the body side of the car through this, and hopefully we can do that without having to like hack up the body harness of the car. So this should work. If not, it wasn't very expensive, so not a big deal. Alright, so really the two main components that I need in order to get started and going haven't shown up yet. Everything else has, go figure, but the HCR engine harness is not here yet, and the actual Holley Dominator ECU is not here yet. I'm expecting the engine harness relatively soon, and I don't have an exact like ETA or anything on the ECU, so I might have to make like a temporary plan to get it up and going before I get my hands on that. But let's see what else we got. This is in no particular order. All this stuff has shown up in multiple different shipments, and now it's all just kind of piled in one box. This is pretty not exciting, just the main power harness for the ECU. NTK O2 sensor, another NTK O2 sensor. I'm not 100% sure, even though this will likely be a twin turbo deal. I still might just run one O2 and then have a backup, but I might run two, who knows. I just got two because I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. Right, this is a pressure temperature combo sensor. Not sure if you've seen these, but these are pretty cool. Kind of just a two-in-one deal. To be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure even what I'm going to use this for yet, but we'll throw it on there to play with. You got to remember, a lot of the stuff that I'm putting on this car isn't necessarily because I feel that the car needs it. It's all to help teach my Holley Efi online training course. So this car is going to get a bunch of stuff that, again, I don't necessarily think that it needs, but we'll throw it in there. That way everyone in the course can see how it gets set up, how we use it, how we monitor it, how we view it, how we log it, and all that good stuff. Next up, we have a 2-axis G meter. So these are always fun to play with. I know for sure you guys have all seen these, just 100 PSI pressure transducer. And just realized this comes with a pigtail and not with pins in a connector, so probably order some different connectors for these. These are convenient if you don't have the tooling to properly crimp these, but I like to try and make everything one piece if I can. 100 PSI. This looks exactly the same, so I won't bother opening it, but this is a 3.5 bar map sensor. 100 PSI sensor, 100 PSI sensor, 100 PSI sensor. And then also keep in mind that a lot of this order was spur of the moment. Kind of like, yeah, I need an ECU, I need this, I need that, I need a handful of sensors and whatever. So we'll be adding to the list of stuff that we get for quite some time, I'm sure. And then we have a J2 through J4 connector and pins. You can't really see that, but basically these are just the connectors for all of the additional plugs on the Dominator ECU that are part of the actual main engine harness. Here we have the, what do they call these, like the high flow boost control solenoids. So again, anything I'm doing on this car will, just in standard Mac valves would have been plenty fine, but we'll probably mount this and then 3 or 4 3-port solenoids, and then probably an additional 4-port solenoid, and I'll make it all like kind of modular where we can unplug and plug in, and then we can go through all the different boost control methods with the car, again for the sake of the training course. These work pretty good with CO2. I don't recall if I've ever run these without CO2, I don't remember. Most street car stuff, I honestly feel that just a single 3-port Mac valve is all you need. But a lot of guys are dead set on still doing dome pressure control on the street car non-CO2 stuff, so we gotta cover it. This is just the air temp sensor, and this here is just a drive-by wire harness. And I guess it hasn't shown up yet. There's a EGT kit somewhere. So again, EGTs, I think once you go the methanol route, they're very helpful, very useful. On the gasoline stuff, it's not nearly as important, but again, we're going to install that stuff just for educational purposes. Next, we have a MSD solid state relay. I have absolutely no idea what I would use this for on this car yet, but we'll probably just wire it up so it's there and ready. That way when we decide we have something that we need it for, it's there. So these things are pretty cool. Again, this one's more for demonstrative purposes than something that I feel I actually need for this. Up next is the LED light bar. These are pretty cool. I'm surprised more people don't use these. I haven't gotten to play with one with Holley, but I've used similar stuff with other ECUs. I'm a firm believer that if your car makes any type of power, like there's just no way you're, even with like a Holley dash or something, you're not keeping an eye on that stuff. So warning lights make all the difference in the world. And then progressive shift lights are just kind of fun to play with. But basically you got some different mounting options. And this is all through the CAN bus, so you have a bunch of LEDs. And we can program for different warning lights on the 4 outers here, and then we can have a progressive LED shift light up here. So this is actually thinner than I thought it was going to be, which is really good. It's a little wider than I thought it was going to be, but assuming I can find somewhere cool to mount this in the car, this thing's going to be pretty fun to play with. And we'll also power this thing up on the bench setup over there, and we'll set this all up in the course. And these things aren't that expensive either, so this is kind of just more of a cool play toy than anything else. But again, warning lights are awesome. I'll put that away nice later. This actually showed up kind of unexpected at my house last night, and this is what I've been waiting on for a lot of the interior stuff. So I'll rip the interior apart, we'll mount this, and we'll fix the flap thing with the foam that's shooting all over the place, and then we can look at fixing the radio situation. But this is a 686 Pro Dash. I have a 12.3 dash over there, but the 12.3 dash is just way too big for these cars. And I think the factory gauge cluster on this car is pretty nice looking, and the center console is super ugly. So the plan here is to actually mount this somewhere in the center console. That way you can have like your normal tach, speedometer, and all that stuff in the normal gauge cluster. And then we can put some cooler stuff on here. I see so many guys that buy dashes and they just put like, they'll take out the factory gauge cluster and then they'll just put what would be on the factory gauge cluster on here, and then they never even like monitor any of the other channels or anything. So like in those situations, I kind of feel like these aren't getting taken full advantage of. And there's a few things that I'd like to do with this that honestly I'm not even sure if we're capable of doing so. So there's definitely some learning that I have to do with this, and that's always fun. So once I learn, then I pass it on to you guys. So I don't have time to mount this or get started on that side of it today. I got a meeting in the next half hour or so, but let's jump inside the car and I'll show you my thought process on where I want to put this. If you ever want to see the difference in size in the 12.3 and the 686 dash, it's pretty massive. Corner to corner, that's how much of a difference you got. There's a little bit of a shame that there's so much border. Like this thing is so big, it's hard to mount, and we lose like this much all the way around of kind of dead space. But either way, the dashes are still really nice. It's pretty dark in here, hopefully it doesn't look too bad, but here you can see that the actual gauge cluster looks something along the lines of what you would expect and maybe not hate. There you can see once we power it up, it's got this super like old looking orange bullshit, and then that airplane sounding thing is the power steering pump priming itself. It only sounds like that for a couple seconds and it goes away. So ultimately, because all of this crap is orange, I found I haven't put a lot of effort into looking into this yet, but I found an MP3 head unit that's the same like orange color. I don't really care about any of that, but that'll make it match. But my original thought was you can actually move these HVAC controls down here. My thought was to bring these, the HVAC and the head unit, god damn it, to bring the HVAC and the head unit down here to this lower part that's totally useless, unless you want to hold your tapes in here. And then whatever the hell this is, I don't even know if this works. But that's got to go. But this is actually angled like this, like it's not just flush like this is. And I think the Holley dash might actually look nicer down there as opposed to being up here. So I got to rip all of this stuff out in order to fix the to fix that foam shooting nonsense. So I'll play with exact orientation of how I want to do that, and then once I mount this, then I can commit to whatever I'm going to do for a head unit. And then just to show you what I'm talking about with the foam stuff, you can see here it's all just shooting out of the vent, so you turn the vent on and just blast your eye holes out. So it sucks, it's annoying, I gotta fix that. The other thing I don't like about mounting the dashes in where the actual cluster goes is it is just super annoying to try to reach through to program it. Like 90% of the time it feels like the steering wheel itself is in the way of the dash, so you want to like look at a channel and you're having to like do this to look through the steering wheel. So I like having my primary garbage here and like kind of factory orientation, and then we'll have everything else mounted there in the center console, and I think it'll make it look a lot nicer in here. All right, that feels like a good stopping point for this video, so I'll see you on the next one.